tetragrammaton.
Where does art come from? Where does anything come from? Like, why do I have a thought after the next thought after the next thought? Like, why does it move in one direction? And why do you want to make another thing and another thing? And where does that come from that comes to you? And
Yeah.
some of it becomes more mysterious, and other things become like to take on a kind of form that I understand better. Like I think recently a lot about vectors. So first of all, I was working with this kid and we use a lot of vectors into design stuff. And if you have a vector, it never makes an abrupt move. Like if you pull it here, it goes there. There is something to a vector. It's like a wave. And I even feel that at the moment, like breathing or whatever, or tension in the body, you feel this, and you like how there is a, and what I kind of like about the vector at the moment is there is a linear direction of movement to this, you know, that I often think when you make stuff that it is on a, not on a line, but more on a moving thing.
It's like rolling through.
I think it's more like on a wave or on something, but it's the same in your mind. Like, what makes your mind want to have the next thought after you just, it keeps going.
Or even the first thought, where does it come from? I know in my case, sometimes there'll be a trigger. It'll be in reaction to something, but I don't know what the nature of that reaction is. You know, I'll hear something, an idea will pop into my head in reaction to something, but they might not be related at all. And I don't see the connection.
Yeah.
But I know without that trigger, I wouldn't have had the thought.
Oh, absolutely. With some of the making, like what's interesting about what keeps work interesting to me is that you never know, because there are things when you express yourself with your hands that are not clear where they come from. They just come kind of out of a knowledge of a hand. I'm sure it's the same with instruments. It's like it's just another part of your body you can use, and like how all these parts of your body can play together. And then I get obsessed. Once I'm like on something, I become like driven to the point where when I go to bed, I dream about this stuff.
Yeah.
And then I know I need to slow down.
Yeah. Do you think of yourself as a researcher in that way?
I always absorb any kind of information I find.
Do you research things online? How do you do your
anything? I buy a lot of books, like almost every day or every couple days. I buy books.
What would be the range of subjects?
Books primarily art books with pictures in them. I never read text. I just look at the images. Like I'm like image.
What about like engineering books or mechanical things?
Well, I buy books about plants. I buy book, like for example, I bought a book about pines. So that was kind of interesting because there is actually a pine cone. You have these pines here, two different ones, but there is one here that only opens in a fire.
I didn't know that.
So the sap closes the pine cone, so nobody can steal the seeds. And they pop open in a fire. And then afterwards, the brush is cleared and they have fertile ground. And that's how they think is their biggest way of success is starting there, you know, things like that.
I was researching pine cones this week also.
I can send you this book about pines. It's really good. It's actually, once you get hooked on those, it's about every kind of plant. There is one I have about roses. One of my favorite things is grass. I love grass, you know, because grass is like leaves, you know, they all look different. They're all the same, you know, but they all have that little individual something, you know, they express themselves in different ways, or
Yeah. And when you look close, there's a lot going on in grass.
yeah,
There's a lot of life happening.
and it's beautiful.
Yeah. Very
It's
beautiful.
smart. You know, palms are grass, you know that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're grass, so that's why they grow a thing, and they have that. So the coconuts must, in this case, be seeds, not nuts. And coconuts, for example, like that's the kind of research. So coconut, in a way, I have the coconut, the beaches, because the coconut is a self-contained thing. It has all its nutrients and everything. It floats on the ocean, and then gets washed up, and it can sprout while it floats on the ocean for 3-4 months, and it can sprout there and start to grow. It's like its own little island that then gets washed ashore in a storm weather, and it gets why you have coconut trees on the beach.
That's
I mean,
fascinating.
it's totally, once you start looking at that stuff, you're like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think recognizing those patterns are really helpful if you're making things. Just knowing how some things work is helpful.
And nature works. I mean, I'm just in awe, lifelong, forever awe.
Is all art essentially a conversation with what came before?
I think it's a conversation with what's before, and it's a passing on. The way I always understood it is you get something. I mean, basically, when I was a teenager, I realized at some point you can jump in to art. You know, so there was somewhere with a good library, and I went there, and you can say you can just hop on that train, you know, and then it starts expanding very fast, like any new field you get in at that age. But you're like, wow, and you just see the whole line, and you're part of anything that was ever made. You can become part of that.
Yeah.
And in that, I believe that it's basically you just pass on, and by passing it on, you pass it through you, and so it's more about passing on than about the past in a way, because nothing lives if it's not remembered.
Yeah. And the idea that it's going by whether you participate or not. You choose to get involved, but if you don't, it's going.
It's going anyway.
You know, it's going.
Yeah.
Was there a library that first caught your attention?
I think the first library caught my attention is my grandparents had art books, you know, from a series, maybe a subscription. You get one a month for like Caravaggio, and because they were not the good books, they were like low, you know.
Yeah.
They were like on the bottom shelf, and
you could reach them.
You can reach them, and you look at all these pictures, and you don't know anything makes any sense. And mainly in there was always this Bruegel and Hieronymus Bosch. These two, these images, when you look at them as a kid, they go a little deep.
Do you remember looking at the images and not knowing what they meant or not understanding them?
I know there was one painting that had, actually my grandparents, they had a print reproduction of one painting of, I think, a Bruegel painting, and there were people that were sitting in some kind of taverna restaurant on some benches, and they were wearing hats, and then they had dishes, plates, and there was one plate was with something red on it, and some were with something white on it. And I was always thinking of, like, you don't know what it is, the food, but you don't even think how it tastes. It's just, there is something in there. There is this red and this white plate. So maybe it was a formal thing, or maybe it meant something, but you just like, you get fascinated or hung up with weird stuff.
You didn't know why it was. Why weren't they all the same?
Yeah, no, or why they were two. I mean, it's the way it's kind of similar to, you know, how the brain goes to places. Like, you don't know why for a month you think about a particular place 30 years back, a particular time, and there is no real connector. It's not, oh, you had a revelation or saw something interesting. If you just were waiting somewhere, or like, you know, and how you go to that other place in your brain.
Yeah.
And it's like, what are you?
Yeah, what's happening?
Yeah.
Yeah, so much of it is both out of our control, but even out of our understanding. It's dreamlike.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know about understanding anymore.
Do you try to understand or no?
Sure. I mean, you try to make sense, but it's also like you actually continues the conversation I had with this boxing coach. He was saying, you know, like when you stop fighting life, your life is good.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
I thought is a very interesting thing coming from an old boxer, you know.
Yeah. Tell me, in your view, the evolution of art over time.
I'm not sure there is one. I don't think art got better, if that makes sense, you know. I couldn't really say there is something like, I was just trying to think like an analogy to music. And when I thought of music from the medieval times, I used to have a Hildegard from being in a CD.
Yeah,
and
incredible.
You can listen to it, it's beautiful, but it's not, you don't really know how to integrate that so much in your daily life. And like things that I think music allows a lot of stuff in, the ways to celebrate life. And I'm not sure art really, like visual art, if you frame it like that narrowly, added that much more to it, you know. I mean, maybe it did. I like old stuff.
Me too.
And I like new stuff too, but it's kind of, you know, if you think of, we work in images, and one analogy, the way I always look at it is, if you drive, whatever comes at you is new. That's the new. And new is always about new. And it's instantaneous, and you try to understand or sort it. And then there is the blind spot, the thing that's not new. It's not a threat. You don't need to sort it out. So it becomes kind of uninteresting, and you stop seeing it, you know? And then there is the rear view mirror. And in the rear view mirror, things get compacted and they become an image. And once you have the image, it's like you're free to just look at it because it's not coming at you. So then you can kind of just be in this image. Like, for example, here when we look at this John Chamberlain, it's the guy's not alive anymore.
In the analogy of driving and what's coming towards you, are you saying that the things that you notice are the things that are new? In other words, if you drove the same route every day,
Yeah.
a lot of what you see would become background wallpaper and you wouldn't notice it anymore.
Yeah.
But if there's something that's not there every day, that's the new thing.
That's the new thing, or it's a threat. I mean, new is also fear. You got to make sure you survive. So, like, let's say I was just on the freeway and I didn't see that big sheet of metal getting under our car, but it's like, then it's there very quickly. But if you see that, then that maybe doesn't happen. Like, you always, you know.
Yeah. Would you say that you notice things in everyday life and they work their way into your work, or not necessarily?
Everything. I'm an omnivore.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have a practice. Like, my practice is just doing things.
Yeah, just making things or doing things?
Both. Like making things, thinking about things, doing things. I just love it. Calms me down somehow.
Yeah.
Gives me something to do, or I don't have a big plan.
How would you say sculpture works different than other forms, if it does?
I don't know. All I learned is you compete with reality, or you partake in like reality in a way of a spatial. And an image has usually, I think why images have frames or borders are because it's like you enter it and it's not a real thing. It's like an image. And then in the image, everything is possible. But when you make a sculpture, you're kind of bound by the physical world. If there's one approach, you know, to understand it. I don't know. It needs to communicate with the physical world, you know, in a different way than an image does. An image is also scalable more. Like, let's say you can look at an image in a photograph, this. Image is more in the mind, and that's I haven't not figured it out, but I do like that challenge.
With sculpture, do you always make it knowing where it's going to be, or no?
No, I try to always make it that it can be anywhere where it wants to be, that it's independent. Everything, you know, everything is synergy, and often unbeknownst to us, like the extent of what synergy does, what you find, what you give yourself permission to engage in or something. So like, let's say the simplest way to explain it, when I work with somebody, their psyche limits what I do, and their psyche expands what I do, or my understanding of their psyche. And I don't know exactly like how to quantify that, but with certain people, you take certain risks.
Yeah.
With certain people, maybe there is a moment in your life and a moment in their life where things make sense. Like, I think the best way I ever experienced that was I made a show with Gavin Brown. I don't know if you know who he is.
Yeah.
So I was in a phase I wanted to make a show where I show less than there was there before.
Yes.
And I started to remove in my mind a little bit of the space. And then I just thought I'd take the slab out of the floor. And then I thought, why stop there? Let's just keep digging in my mind. So I thought, like, let's take as much as we can out. And at the same time, Gavin was open, but he's also 3 months earlier, his mother passed. So I think we were both, for two different reasons, in an emotional state where that kind of made sense. I would not think about doing a show like this with other people I work with, just because it's not there, and that's more something in hindsight I realize, this person is kind of careful and very business oriented, and so you kind of neaten your act up somehow. It's like you don't realize how it is. Now I pay more attention, like out of the gate, if it doesn't feel right, or you can use that as an interesting adventure to work with somebody. As long as you have your boundaries in the right place, that's okay,
LMNT, element electrolytes. Have you ever felt dehydrated after an intense workout or a long day in the sun? Do you want to maximize your endurance and feel your best? Add element electrolytes to your daily routine. Perform better and sleep deeper. Improve your cognitive function. Experience an increase in steady energy with fewer headaches and fewer muscle cramps. Element electrolytes. Drink it in the sauna. Refreshing flavors include grapefruit, citrus, watermelon, and chocolate salt. Formulated with the perfect balance of sodium, potassium, and magnesium to keep you hydrated and energized throughout the day. These minerals help conduct the electricity that powers your nervous system so you can perform at your very best. Element electrolytes are sugar-free, keto-friendly, and great tasting. Minerals are the stuff of life. So visit drinklmnt.com/tetra and stay salty with Element Electrolytes. LMNT.
Tell me more about the digging. That's a really interesting idea. It starts with an idea, and do you necessarily know what's going to happen?
It's not an idea. It was more a feeling. The feeling is I made so many shows. I didn't want to show some, and also at the time it felt so like the whole art thing. That was a year before the 2008 crash, but it felt so kind of heated up.
Yeah.
The feeling was more, you want to do the opposite.
Yeah. You said take away.
Take away, show nothing. But can you show nothing and show something,
Yeah, yeah.
Or show less?
And do you think you were digging up or looking for what was underneath? Digging could mean a lot of things,
Yeah. For me, what it was more about like something, for a lack of better words, about like something soul and something that's in deeper, It's not like
going
something
inside.
Going inside, like digging deeper in a good and a bad way, not needing to qualify that, but just like wanting to know more or needing more or whatever it is, just like going in.
Just in a practical way, you couldn't do it on the third floor of a museum.
No.
It only works on the ground floor.
It works on the ground floor, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, without a basement.
Yeah, without a basement.
Yeah.
And was it dirt underneath?
It was just dirt. I think that part of the West Village is Lambville or Greenwich Village. I don't know what exactly it is.
Where did it happen?
Bottom of West Village was Greenwich and Leroy, like somewhere there in Manhattan.
Yeah, downtown.
And then was this fantasy, like buildings totally disappear, like a gallery would not be there anymore. And a few years later, I walked by that same gallery where I made the show, and they tore it down to build a build a
It's too bad you could have put your name on it. If you only knew.
Exactly, you know, they do it for you.
It's amazing. Yeah. Does it ever happen that way where conditions come together seemingly on their own?
Yes. If it works out, I mean, who knows? But like, if it feels right, it feels right. And then they all sync up somehow.
Yeah. Do you have a name for the paintings with the fruit or vegetables over the faces?
Yeah, they're problem paintings is what I
Problem paintings.
And I don't really know. I mean, I was not so much aware of that when I started with it. I mean, it has a few different origins in some ways.
What was the very first one?
The very first one was, there were some kind of Frankenstein monsters. And I loved this image of this Frankenstein. And
the whole body or the portrait?
It was a portrait. There was some of them torso. And I just always liked that character, you know.
Yeah.
Somehow, so it started with that. But the images I collected is I had there was this teenage boy that was the cousin or the nephew of my girlfriend at the time, and I got him some kind of, you know, one of these skater figurine. There was a hand with an eye in it or something like that,
Yeah.
and I made a package for him, like a, you know, gift wrapping, and I wanted to make it cooler, and I kind of just printed out these monsters because of the monster to make as a gift wrapping paper. And then I started working with these images. I didn't know what to do with them until I put some kind of metal things on them first. But there is a lot of origins for me. Like I once had a friend or somebody I didn't keep contact, and he took some drugs, and I think he was psychotic. And when he left the house one day, he started to have a tiny little colored dot smack in the middle wherever he looked. And over a month, that dot expanded to a size where he couldn't function anymore because he couldn't see a door handle or a car. You know, in the beginning,
what started as a dot of color expanded to take over his field of vision.
Yeah, so slowly, every day it expanded more, so till he couldn't function anymore.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, I think he went to some place to get help, you know.
Yeah.
So in a way, that's something I always thought, like this obstruction of, like any form of obstruction between you and this. And then later on, I realized, oh, I saw that all my life. There is these Magritte paintings that work like this. I'm like, oh, that's probably plays a huge part in it. But at that point, I was already kind of, I had my own fun with it. So
yeah.
And I'm okay with, you know, I think it's something else if you look at something and you copy it, like, or you just land in the same place, or subconsciously maybe you're influenced. I think that's all fair game.
For sure.
Then I just thought in some way, I grew up in, you know, the 70s as a kid, and there were still a lot of black and white movies on the TV. And there were still these kind of older movie stars, and they were interesting to me not because they were interesting, they were just interesting because they were like perfect. They were these self-contained things, you know what I mean?
Yeah. You think because you only saw them in black and white?
Maybe that's a big thing. I think there's a lot of reasons that only black and white. I think it's from a different time, or it's before counterculture in this way, or where you see how people look in photographs. And they're just kind of perfected. I think it's the way the whole, like a lot of things worked at that time. You know, it's like this maybe smoothing over some cracks in the whole thing, or
yeah.
But in some way, the way they were photographed, they look like empty, but they look like so much.
Yeah.
But it's not them. It's never them. It's just like this thing, and then that has some form of expression or beauty, almost like a Greek statue in a way. I mean, there is a link if you look at horse photography, or like this kind of idealization of this light and whatever. Like it's kind of like this. It's just these things where they don't get in the way. So I realized when you use images like that, they don't interfere because it's not a person who is like they don't need anything.
Yeah.
They're made to not need.
Yes.
They're made for you to project on. And, you know, I always like still life photography. I like to look at stuff up close. And then I realized, like, for example, that a fruit is much more timeless than these people, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I asked my 16-year-old daughter about 4 years ago when she was 12. She and her friends were there. So somehow, does anybody know who Marilyn Monroe is? One said, yes, I heard about her. And then so Elvis, the same girl, said yes. The other one, no clue. You know, this is like the idea of iconography and like how in popular culture.
Short-lived.
Very short-lived. Now with all the YouTube, like how these references are like just like out the window.
If the first one was Frankenstein, what ended up on top of Frankenstein?
Metal. One was some kind of galvanized pipe, like a plumbing pipe, you know, and then the other one was a bent spoon.
Yeah.
Maybe it was inspired by as a kid, like Uri Geller, you know,
Yeah.
so
Could be.
this kind of, exactly, like a bent spoon, and
Yeah.
then one was another piece of metal conduit-y kind of thing, you know.
And did it turn into a format? Like, are they in a series where the size is similar?
Yeah, it became like that.
Yeah.
And then I still sometimes get back into it and I have fun doing like 2, 3, and then I'm.
Do you have other series like that? I've seen like the metal boxes.
They were all done at the same time, the metal boxes. That's different. That was.
That's one period of time.
Yeah, no, I don't really have, do I? There's some paintings I make on the iPad, or like things that come out of like, you know, just out of living with certain devices or toys, you know, like whatever you have. Then there are some other things where it's more serial. I think you don't even have to worry about it because you're so limited as a human being. You will always, in the end, make exactly what you do.
Yeah. Would you say a lot of decision goes into what you make, or is it more, it just happens?
I try to be somewhat disciplined, but within each thing. And I believe in that, not in a Shinto way, but the thing has somewhat its own life and logic and wants to go where it goes. And you can guide, you can follow, and you can make it grow, but you cannot force.
Yeah.
And then when I realized like there are two things at play, then I try to shave one of them out.
Yeah.
Like often you come from into something and then there is actually 2, 3 things that are there, and you just try to somewhat
say focus it
or let it be one thing, not 3 things at once. And then that sometimes leads to something boring, and sometimes it's more exciting, but it's like you let it do its own thing. It's some form of editing, but I think it's a pre-editing. It's not that you edit at the end, you kind of edit as you go or before along.
Yeah. Typically when you have an idea for an edit and you do the edit, are you ever surprised by what happens?
Sometimes in a positive way, and sometimes more with the sculpture stuff. It's in a pretty kind of not disappointment, but sobering.
Yeah.
Like from your high when you think this is great, and then you have the thing, and it's like kind of okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't look right, you know.
Yeah. And does that just mean time to keep working on it, or does it mean discard it and make a new thing?
Usually I put it aside.
Yeah. Do you put things aside and come back around to them later? See into them anew later on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you're also just not at peace with, I don't know what it is. Sometimes you're not at peace with anything you do, and for me, then I don't like it. I mean, it's the same when I make a book or a show or whatever. I'm really excited most of the way through with some dips. And when it's all coming together, I usually cannot walk into that show again.
Yeah.
I have a really complicated relationship with that. And then in hindsight, like the more time passes back to this rear view mirror thing, it's like the more I can also embrace that, and actually sometimes even think that's cool. Wow.
Yeah.
But it takes me a really long time to find some connection,
Yeah. When you're making it, you're probably too close to it.
Yeah.
But with time, you can see it like a spectator.
More so.
More so. Do you ever see something new, like years later, in a piece that you didn't realize why you liked something, and then years later you come to like, now I understand it?
Oh, a lot, yeah. That's kind of, that's, and some of it is also like, who was that guy that made this? Like that's the other encounter I have.
It can feel totally foreign.
It feels foreign, or you kind of have like I kind of know where I was at somewhat, but you're not really there anymore, and you don't really know, or you see it maybe a little more forgiving with that guy that once was, and so you can see that guy tried to do this, and then that lets you look up the thing, somehow.
Ever the other way, where it's like, wow, that guy was great, I wish I could do what he does?
Oh, there's a lot of stuff I could never do again.
Yeah.
That I wish I don't know, not in a way of like lose any sleep over it, but it's more like there's sometimes like an innocence or a cluelessness, or like a freshness or a lightness, not even light, just like unweighed down, or
now you know a lot more than you did then. And that can either be helpful or it can completely undermine the
that can do everything. Well, I'll take that over the other thing at any second. I mean, I don't think there was ever a day in my life where I wanted to go a day back. And it's weird how that just happens. Like, I think most people feel somewhat this way, and how you would never want to trade back. I mean, sure, so the body and stuff like that's kind of not so fun. But even that,
In a world of artificial highs and harsh stimulants, there is something different, something clean, something precise. Athletic nicotine. Not the primitive products found behind convenience store counters. Not the aggressive buzz that leaves you jittery, but a careful calibration of clean energy and focused clarity. Athletic nicotine. The lowest dose tobacco-free nicotine available. Made entirely in the USA. No artificial sweetener, just pure, purposeful elevation. Athletic nicotine is a performance nootropic. Athletic nicotine is a tool for shifting mindsets. Athletic nicotine is a partner in pursuit of excellence. Slow release, low dose, gradual lift, sustained energy, soft landing, inspired results. Athletic nicotine, more focus, less static. Athletic nicotine, more clarity, less noise. Athletic nicotine, more accuracy, less anxiety. Athletic nicotine, from top athletes pushing their limits to artists pursuing their vision. Athletic nicotine offers the lift you've been looking for. Learn more at athleticnicotine.com/tetra and experience next level performance with Athletic Nicotine.
Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical.
Would you say all the work in some way is biographical?
I think it's inevitable, personally. That's my opinion. There's a lot of different thoughts from different people, but I think biographical energy plays into anything you do. It's maybe self-synergy or whatever, but it's like, there is not just you doing the thing, there is you doing the thing, And I do like a practice where you just do whatever comes your way. Then I have friends that have this practice where they do this thing they do, and they do this thing for decades. And if I envision myself like you do this thing, you go in there for 10 hours a day and you do this thing. What is that thing? But maybe within that, there is a lot of room.
Yeah.
For also biographical little things. It's just maybe it's not as loud, it's maybe not as screaming, it's not like as raw. Maybe it's, I don't know what it is, but it's fascinating to me. And that's also, I think you see that more with people that have an image, so to speak, like what they do. The stance, it's like there's a clear representation of one thing. When you think about art, one thing I'm fascinated about it is, like, I like oeuvres. I don't like individual artworks much, but I like what somebody did in their entire life.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
The body of work.
The whole body of work with their bad years, the good years, the interesting, the whole package,
yes,
I think is where the real power lays for me in art. Like, it's a kind of a package I find not so clearly in other arts.
Yeah.
And in that, there is this thing where, there is always this idea of authenticity. Somebody can be very greedy and corrupt and just makes things for money, but that's authentic. You have a very authentic person trying to make a little step into a commercial thing, and they lose everything they have. And it's just because it's not authentic to them. And you see that this is just one fragment. You see, like, if you look at somebody's entire life of everything they do, and when it comes to an image, you see, like, one of my best or closest experience I have, like, with art, where it's really positive because I'm not always liking it, is I go into a beautiful retrospective show somewhere, and I walk out and I see things differently.
You see the world differently after experiencing that?
Yes. So it adds something to how I see, or what you pay attention to, or what you just how you experience things,
Yeah.
Like it
It'd be like reading someone's biography. The equivalent to that would be going to their show, seeing their life's work, and you're getting a sense of how they see the world.
And it's in a more visual, like, nonverbal way. And I that's something I'm always drawn logically I just like shapes and colors. For whatever reason, we have different preferences as people.
Yeah.
Somebody saw it for you and then helps you see it in a way.
Yeah. You see a new possibility, maybe.
Yeah. Or you understand them, and that's more of an image, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I often think if you're more all over the place, what is your image here?
Yeah.
You
remember the first time you had the experience of seeing a retrospective of an artist and feeling changed by it?
Yeah, totally.
What was the first one?
As a semi-grown up, like, about 17 or 18, I saw a Bruce Nauman show, and I didn't know who that is. And I walked in there, and there were these clowns screaming and some shit moving, and you're like, I really felt that. I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, you see things in a way you've never experienced them before.
Did you say you had no context for it?
Zero. Yeah. Very little. It just walked in, and you're like...
Yeah. When there's no context, it could go either way. Like, it could be the coolest thing you've ever seen, or the first instinct could be, I don't know what this is, I don't like it, But
that's two feelings.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of things you don't like, they're kind of the same as the things you like.
Yeah.
They
have some charge that you're reacting to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When you were describing the energy before, there's a piece in the room and there's energy. Is the energy in the piece, or is the energy in you reacting to the piece?
I remember, but I was a little older, it was maybe like 18 or 19. I was in the National Gallery in London. And there is this first room, you come in with all these impressionist paintings, like Van Gogh, sunflowers, a Seurat, this Bafer from whatever, you know. And you can stand there and you watch everybody, most people that came in had a reaction to a recording of some pigment and binder on canvas that has been placed in a specific place.
Yep.
And logically, it's just molecules and whatever.
Yeah.
But everybody had a reaction. So that would make it a perpetuum mobile of sorts. Because everybody can take energy out and only once energy has been put in.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stop giving the energy. And I think that's probably something that has to do with the ability. I mean, you're way more knowledgeable, but anything you can record has that chance of being encountered again and again and again. So in what is it? It's in the recording. In this case, when it's molecules, I mean, I have no idea. But I do know that some things feel good. For example, when it's not just a visual experience, some things feel good, some things look good, some things smell good. And that's definitely like stuff that is in there or tastes good.
Yeah.
You know.
You think it all relates back to nature?
I don't know.
Is nature our blueprint for what looks good and tastes good, or not necessarily?
I mean, like beauty.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated with nature. I have so many different plants. I'm like I have new plants every week. My garden is like full of plants. And I'm fascinated because it grows out of very little. Like even air plants, I have air plants. So it grows out of nothing.
Yes.
Little light, little, I don't know, little water. And they leave more behind than they take. They sort it out with each other. They always figure it out who grows what, but it seems, and then some of them have blossoms. And where you have the blossoms, then you attract insects and you attract birds. Some little hummingbirds, whatever, like, you know. And then the blossoms communicate. And the blossom is like, I don't know the history of the blossom. I was once reading up about it, like magnolias and this. So it became a way of like means of transport or like procreation in a way. And like flowers, even in nature, they stand out. I mean, to us and to any insect, you can just watch. They all know and how they smell. And when you watch an animal, usually they walk, their gait is so graceful. Their coats, I mean, it's just divine, you know?
Yeah.
And they don't make mistakes really or something. They're not confused. And like, you just see them doing their thing. And it's hard to imagine that beauty is not a part of all of it, or that it's just our perception, you know. In my feeling, it is also, you know, like let's say you look at an iPhone.
Yeah.
That's kind of the best we can do.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's really like amazing what they managed to put in there. I mean, like in so many ways, like, but you look at, I like to look at leaves a lot, you know?
Yeah.
And just how that all works, and it makes it all out of nothing, and then it disappears, and how everything works together, and then from whatever, microbes, and really, like all the crazy stuff we don't even understand, but like how smart that design is.
Yes.
And then how clumsy everything else feels, like that our achievements, you know, a toilet bowl or like whatever, you know, it has the right water flow to flush, or like, you know, it's like, I made this.
It's totally barbaric in comparison.
Exactly. To every little bug, it's like, I mean, I watch ants.
Miraculous.
I mean, the ants, then I see the ants carrying like some stuff.
Yeah, big stuff. Little ants carrying big things.
And then you see them communicating, like how they go around. And then you see people trying to communicate. You know?
It's difficult.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, I don't think words do justice to the experience.
No. As a human, you're born early.
Explain.
I think because somebody told me, my sister told me, who studied biology and zoology and whatever. So because we walk upright, we come out a little early for the size of mammal we are, you know. But we can afford that to kind of rear our children slowly. And then if you think it takes 18 years to be able to go out into the world, kind of, you know, until you learn all these complicated social norms and all that. And I was recently at the dentist and I had this video playing of this octopus. You know, it's just one of these underwater films, and it's just like this thing was so freaking smart and beautiful and how it moved. And I was like, then I was thinking about like me raising my 2 daughters and how complicated and get some attitude from a teenager and all this. You're like, what good does that do actually? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like this level of complication to everything and our interactions, like, what is it?
It starts with us deciding we know the right way to do it, which is a real question mark. You know, who knows?
Yeah. I mean, that's just a feeling. When you think you're right, that's usually a feeling, no?
Yeah. Who knows? And what's right for you and what's right for me might not be the same. And what's right for us might not be right for someone on the other side of the world. It's impossible to know. Like there's too many conditions that dictate everything.
Or what you think is right for you is actually wrong for you.
Yeah.
Like,
and we know many of our friends are like this.
Yeah. Oh, I'm like this. You know?
Or the fact that if we were alive 200 years ago, it would be a whole different set of rules.
Yeah.
You know,
not even that long ago. I mean,
yeah, less.
I always remember that my parents said it was difficult to rent an apartment because they were not married.
Yeah.
Like, and then you think, what the fuck?
Yeah.
What do you care? You know?
Yeah.
Like,
and in other parts of the world, the rules could be completely different. How many places have you lived in the world?
Just Europe and here. So it's in Europe, the differences are kind of there, but it's not like
closer than everywhere else.
Yeah, I think I never lived in Latin countries in Europe, so it's like that's a different culture. I think I grew up in Switzerland, and I lived in England, which was more different. Then at some point I ended up in Berlin a bit, and then I lived in Amsterdam. When I was 19, I moved there. So the first place I moved to because I thought it's kind of smaller. I can manage.
So Amsterdam was the first place you moved?
Yeah, and I didn't speak any English, so my English was from liner notes with a dictionary. So it kind of was not.
Was Amsterdam a good experience?
I had a really good time, and it's it was a sweet size of a city. You know, when you're kind of alone and you go out and you don't really know what you want.
Did you already know you were going to do art or no?
Yeah. I just like doing things. So I did like photography and some art stuff before, and I worked a lot. The theater was interesting to me. Like I worked with that a bit, and then when I went to Amsterdam, I thought I'm doing art. Then I bumped into some guy, told me there is a school that gives you money and the studio, and then I went to that school and I knocked on the door, and I had some drawings I made. So I put the drawings in a box, and the night before I walked back, a woman walked by that was heavily perfumed, and I just thought that's kind of a good way to get attention. So I put all this perfume on my application, you know, so you have a little olfactory thing. So that's what,
Interesting.
And then they called, on the phone home, and like they called and said, yeah, you can come in. And then I went there, and they said somebody just left because they had like 10 people a year.
Yeah.
So it's like some postgraduate program. And I know it was not postgraduate, I was 19 and just didn't really finish anything before. And then that was kind of my introduction. Then I first time dealt with people that were educated through art schools and so on.
Was that good or bad?
That was very enlightening.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I didn't start there.
Yes.
For me, it felt like a shock.
Yes.
So you see, there were some dudes that were totally back then, I think there was just the tail end of Julian Schnabel being like a dominating figure in painting, in perception for younger people. And there were these few older dudes that were kind of like fighting to be like this kind of very masculine, large canvas guys. And then there were some people that had some conceptual things, and some people painted some figuration. Each had their little pocket, and they knew exactly what they do, and they had an idea of a career path and a gallery or a museum. Like, it was all educated. And if you come in through the side door, you can just look at it. You're not like in it.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad I did.
Would you say you've always felt like an outsider?
I don't know. Never thought about it this way. But I think of it a little bit the other way around. I think this is a lot of this education and this stuff is kind of alien.
I see.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. You're saying...
I think you just celebrate your life, and I don't understand in various forms. I don't understand this need to quantify that.
Yeah.
As a lot of education in the arts does. I mean,
it's not as free as you see the possibilities. Is that a way to say it?
Yeah, I mean, it's very narrow.
Yeah.
Like, some of it is extremely narrow, and I don't know why one would want to engage in that.
Yeah. I guess if you believe that's what it is, if you learn that early enough, you think that's what it is. You're saying that you had the advantage of not having the blinders put on you early.
Yeah, totally. I think, you know, if you're just surrounded by people that say things and think they are part of it. I mean, it's always belonging to, you know, like the way I understand it, there's a lot of fear, and you want to do the right thing, and you want to be kind of like your peers in some way, and you want to be part. And I don't totally understand, but I do know I don't understand art education.
You think it can be taught?
Back to synergy, you know, I think there are always pockets, as we all know, like in any kind of creative or artistic or even business or whatever, like there is always pockets of people. It's hardly ever you meet a solitaire, you know, you always, there's little things. And what leads to this situation to be fertile, I mean, so many factors we don't know, but it's like then things develop. And it is probably like one way of how you can facilitate a chance that you have. I mean, you always have an experience, but that this experience could be really kind of cross-pollinating and do more. But I'm sure you know better than most people, you cannot force magic.
You can't force anything.
Yeah, and I'm sure like people come to you and they want some magic, and give you some magic, and it's like, you know, like,
it doesn't work that way.
You know,
it doesn't
can't help you there.
What was your first tattoo?
A little dot here.
A dot.
Well, this little dot, you know, when you just take a fountain pen. And then I had there's some lion here, some heraldic lion and something. It's totally dumb. I'm not.
How old were you when you got the dot?
The dot, I've probably, I don't know, 12 or something.
Yeah.
I totally forget that I have tattoos. I have to tell you, I literally forget.
So much of today's life happens on the web. Squarespace is your home base for building your dream presence in an online world. Designing a website is easy, using one of Squarespace's best-in-class templates. With the built-in style kit, you can change fonts, imagery, margins, and menus, so your design will be perfectly tailored to your needs. Discover unbreakable creativity with Fluid Engine, a highly intuitive drag-and-drop editor. No coding or technical experience is required. Understand your site's performance with in-depth website analytics tools. Squarespace has everything you need to succeed online. Create a blog, monetize a newsletter, make a marketing portfolio, launch an online store. The Squarespace app helps you run your business from anywhere. Track inventory and connect with customers while you're on the go. Whether you're just starting out or already managing a successful brand, Squarespace makes it easy to create and customize a beautiful website. Visit squarespace.com/Tetra and get started today.
How was living in New York different than living in Europe?
It was more welcoming as a non-native person. I think that in general about living in North America is my experience as not being from here is such that there are many people that are not from here, or there's different histories, and nobody's really from anywhere. Some people think they are, but like it leaves more room.
Yeah.
And if I try to live somewhere in Europe, not just like to visit or spend some time of the year, once you go somewhere and you're younger and you realize, you will never be English, you will never be Dutch, you will never be whatever, French, Italian, you will never be that. And that's usually after 2 years whenever I started to leave. And in New York, I did not have that experience. I thought I actually become more part of it.
Yes.
The longer I was there, almost to the point where you're like, it's good to get out.
Yeah.
I had this theory at first when I moved there, like in Zurich, where I grew up, the people that went to New York in the 80s or early 90s, a lot of them were very ambitious. And some of them were kind of a little bit of assholes, And I always imagined that city must be a hub for people with too much ambition and this and that. So I never had a fantasy to move there. So my fantasy was always to move to California.
Yeah.
And coming from a medieval city,
Yeah.
I like the idea this is the end of Western civilization, not the old baked in version, so that it's kind of but then once I moved to New York, it's kind of similar. It felt similar than when I first got into art, where you see all these things, all these, where you can hop in and you see books and other sources of information, things in the real, or people, where you realize you can be part of something. And it felt to me still like there is a lot of history.
Yeah.
And going in there, it felt like you're not just a bunch of kids doing something, you're part of a long history. And that was really great to be part of, or to feel that you partake in that somewhat.
Do you feel like there's an artistic community there?
Now?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure, there are. There are communities.
Ongoing.
Ongoing, but you also have people that are 80 that once did something, or people 70, 60, 50. Like you have all in different dimensions, directions, and they're all kind of there, and it's a very rich network of histories and also of self-mythologizing creatures on top of each other. And it gives what you do context and makes you feel what you do has a purpose.
Yeah.
If that's true or not, it doesn't matter. But it's a feeling of you're not just like in somewhere, middle of nowhere, doing something, and then maybe get sent out and you're like, what is that?
Yeah. And the California experience, how's that been for you?
Oh, I just love being outdoors.
Yeah.
I'm outdoor, even in the winter. I have puffy jackets and blankets and heaters.
Yeah.
In this part of my life, that makes more sense to be closer to nature, but still be in an urban place than to be in a lot of noise.
Have you experimented at all with technology?
Always, yeah. I mean, what kind of technology? I mean,
I guess we'll say digital, because I guess there's physical technology too.
yeah, and most things I do go through a computer at some point in various ways, either in conception or in production. I made some kind of robotic chairs a few years back. I don't know when that was, maybe 2018, 19. So there's some free roaming. I don't know if you ever saw it.
I've never seen them. They're chairs that move around?
They're chairs, they're office chairs. I mean, it's totally crazy technology. They make no sound when they move, and the battery, they go and charge themselves. But they're all just one office chair. They have different colors, and they're free-roaming robots, and they're programmed to have different, and they have about 9 sensors built in. I spent a townhouse on those, like totally dumb, but they have different personalities. The way they react to people.
Do you think of them like pets?
No, it was more like it started with the idea of humans and patterns, like how we are working in patterns. So we say you approach somebody and they're very nice. The next time you approach them and you always read what to expect, and some people have a personality where that's kind of shifting, and they mess up a lot of things, And so I wanted to make it's 9 office chairs, and they move around. I wanted them like build expectation, and also like in a way as a human, like have your expectation projected. Oh, I know how this works. You approach it, it goes away. You approach it, it goes away. You approach it, it stands still. You approach it again, it goes away. Then you think it's a glitch. You approach it again, and then it approaches you. You have a very hard time reading what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And very quickly you can create some confusion. So that didn't totally work out because at the time we had a little bit of a lag, just a little bit too long for people that went, because what happens, people go first slow, then they go think it doesn't work, then they go fast, then they go slow, and then the chair reacts, and then you're with a little tiny time lag, you're already kind of not in sync with the people's reaction. So it didn't totally function on this level. And then they did some choreographies together, and I can show you. You want to see that?
Yeah, please.
So I have 2 videos.
It's great. Oh, it's so funny. And they're very ordinary looking chairs. They look like the chairs you'd see in any office.
Yeah, but there is 2 motors per wheel. There is a chip that we had some import problems because you can use it to guide a rocket. There is like all the technology is inside this chair. It's like hidden, and they don't make a sound.
Yeah.
And then the seat cushion is actually the battery that we have made. And there is a robotic thing where they go drive in and charge themselves, and they all know where they are. They know where the people are. I mean, by now we could probably do much better than this, but
it's so cool.
So then we assigned like micro movements. They can go 30 miles an hour.
Wow.
So if you have one glitch, they
could be dangerous.
Yeah. So that's all remade. Like, this is not the real chair. This is all remade.
So cool looking.
And then they do choreographies together. When there is a room, as soon as they see room, they find each other, then they do choreographies.
It's a funny idea to think about, like when the office closes and everybody leaves, that this is what happens,
And see, when somebody goes slow, you can actually do that with them. But with the time lag, they get confused. If you're confused, then, and then they have affinities to each other or not. And it's pretty complex. And the title is Play. And I always thought it's interesting because you can watch animals play.
Yeah.
You don't need to be a human to play,
Yeah.
Like
So from the inception, tell me the process of getting from the idea to getting to that.
I had some idea like some years earlier for that.
Mm-hmm.
There was a table that just moves around. Like whenever you go in a space, the table, it will go away. It will come to you and this and that. Because I saw like some cars, when you back up, you have these little sensors. I thought that's easy to do. And it wasn't. And then I forgot about it. And at some point I was thinking about it again. And I called a friend of mine who has nothing to do with robotics, but he's very smart. And then we did this in 1.5 years, the whole production and everything.
Are the ideas ever based on a new technology you see and then you see an application? Or is it always the dream of what it could be first and then figuring out how to technically make it happen?
It's more like you're kind of informed what you see in the real world, maybe in this way, but you don't know how it works, but you think it should be possible to push that. And apply that in a different context, like just backing up cars and cameras and sensors. Why can't we put that in something else? And then the other thing is a vocabulary. I mean, things you have done before, or like when we do a lot of things now, or you scan stuff or any kind of how you go about or work with data, you have a vocabulary of what you know is possible.
Yeah.
And that informs the way you think about, like, for example, I often with a work, I just lay around and then I think about something, or it comes from wherever, it's just there. And then I go through the whole process of how it's made, one step by step. So I pre-make the entire thing in my mind with all the technical complications and everything in it. And so then it's kind of finished in this way, and then you make it. And then when you make it, it logically doesn't turn out exactly like how you imagine it, and then you deal with that part.
Does that whole process happen before you ever say, write it down or draw something? Or
So that's a funny question, because I mean, it's the same when people say they write their diaries and they do it by hand, of how that affects your thinking and what you write and how it's part of your life. Like when you write, the fact that you're thinking is much faster than you writing that sentence is kind of a good thing sometimes. But then what I don't like personally about writing is that it has to somewhat make sense. Like you start with a sentence and it goes to the next sentence, and then you're like, you kind of put yourself a bit into a corner.
I see.
And then how you get out of there. So the other thing is more, it's also more for three-dimensional things where you have to, the production or the whole, like how it comes into life, where you need to fold that in early,
For sculpture, is there a point where you build a small model?
Hardly ever, no. It's the same with like notes. I make a lot of notes, but my notes are really messy. They're not like accurate drawings.
But you know what they mean, or they help you remember things?
I used to make lots of them, and I plaster my walls with them.
Yeah.
And then I thought of it as a three-dimensional model of ideas and how they interconnect and so on. But then I realized I never look at them again. Never. And then I had boxes full of that stuff. And then I stopped doing them. And now recently, the last year, I got back into it, but I never look at that stuff again.
Yeah. Do you think art is meant to be seen next to other art?
You mean physically? It can. I mean, I don't mind it. I'm not mad at it.
Does it change anything? Does it?
Context changes everything. Yeah, always. I mean, it's even like in your brain, when you look at something, you think you already bring context into everything,
Yeah.
And some stuff looks way better when you combine it.
Has your work ever been censored?
Has it? Oh, the last time I got some slack was we put up this big sculpture in the center of Moscow, and like, huge outdoor sculpture, I don't know, 45 feet or whatever, in the center of the city, and it got singled out by some more right parts in politics as weird things. It obstructs the basilisk of the thing, or whatever, a liberal turn, or now this comes to our city, whatever. But it's not my work. It's like, it's ridiculous. I mean, there's a lot of problems there, and it's definitely not in a piece of metal.
Yeah. Yeah. You've made pieces that are wax, and they're candles, essentially?
Yeah, they work like a candle. Wasn't in the beginning. I mean, it started like, I kind of always like when they light a candle for something or somebody. It's like as a flame, or like, I think a lot of us think about flames as like some of the flame of life, or like a soul, or like there's something to fire that I don't know what it is, but I always see fire as something alive.
Yeah.
So I just put on some sculptures, I just put a regular household candle, just to kind of, because I thought it maybe it needs to be alive. So you put that there, and then all of a sudden the thing becomes alive, you know. If you think you have your office chair there, and you put a candle on that, then the chair becomes like something else, you know. So it's a way, and then it shifted from there. So why not make a whole thing out of as a candle? In the beginning, I carved these female figures, like in a more traditional. I had no clue what I was doing. More traditional kind of art idea, you know, like of a, like it felt like a nude, somewhat figure is like the most simplest figure that doesn't need to be like somebody, you know.
Yeah.
And some years later, there was this guy, Peter Brandt. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a collector, and he's married with Stephanie Seymour, and they have they commissioned various artists to make portraits of her. One is Maurizio Cattelan did, Julian did a portrait, and different people. And I have a portrait in mind, and it was a portrait of Peter Brandt. And this is just when the scanning technology for people kind of like to scan human bodies was somewhat mobile enough that we could work with this technology. And it was a portrait of Peter standing behind this chair, and the chair was empty. And that was my portrait of her, because all the other artists made a portrait of her. And I thought there is something, he's also in there, you know?
Yeah.
And I wanted to call the piece Stephanie. And I made a show at the Brand Foundation, at their family foundation in Connecticut. And that piece was a part of the works in there, but they separated in that time. And so I couldn't call the piece Stephanie anymore. I thought that would just feel bad, you know? So then it was just Peter, and out of that came these portraits. And then the next thing, at the time, I shared a studio with Rudi Stingl, and then I wanted to make a portrait of him. And then I wanted to make a portrait of him, and then I thought, because he grew up in Italy, in northern Italy, like all the history, this European history. So then I thought he should be with a big sculpture, like of a pressing old European art history kind of big thing, you know. And so that got out of hands. That thing became very big. And then I wanted to put something else that's totally not thinking this way, the thing's ergonomic. There's an office chair, actually the same one I use for the robots, because it has an ergonomic design that this doesn't go by the same aesthetic principle. So I just had that to occupy like some space around it. So that's kind of how that came about. And then I got into it whenever I met somebody that I felt has like their resting position pretty much, you know, carries an image. Like one friend of mine, I made a thing of this guy, Adam McEwen, a good friend of mine, but he's kind of tall, and he often looks down, so he's a bit more like a shoegazer. He feels some kind of the weight of thought always in his posture, and it's not that it's about him being this way. It's like more like an image of that, and he just shows that very well. Or I made this portrait of Julian Schnabel, and he sits on this crate, and that was my image of Julian in a way. It's like this. And on one side, it's like a boy sitting by a pier fishing. But then if you look from underneath, it's also like a pedestal. You're kind of on there, and
it's great.
It's you know, so that's kind of just these images of people. So all these portraits are basically candles. That's what I meant. Like, so from putting a candle on top of it to making
it out of a candle.
Make it out of wax or a candle. So make the sculpture as the candle instead of putting a topper on it.
Now, do you do that by sculpting into the wax, or do you melt the wax and pour it into a form?
You make a negative and you brush in the surface, all the different colors into the halves or multi-parts. Then that gets thickened up, combined, and then we turn it upside down and fill it with the wax.
I see. So the color is actually in the wax.
Yeah, it's brushed into the mold.
Yeah.
when you take the mold away, then it's basically like in there. It's part of the body. It's not applied after, you know.
Do you ever make more than one candle out of the same mold?
Yeah, you can. Well, it will last about 5-6 runs a mold.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's good. And you know, the good thing is you can burn it down.
Yes.
And then you can make a new one.
Yeah.
So it doesn't age. It doesn't have the problem of aging, which everything in the physical world has the problem of aging. You know?
Do any of them live not burned? Like,
yeah, most of it costs a fortune to recast them. That's a expensive hobby to light that thing up. You know,
I read a story somewhere that you had a plan to build a bed for a show, but it ended up becoming a horse. Does that sound familiar?
a horse. It's a horse bed. I don't know. That doesn't sound familiar. But what it was like a horse and carriage. I was thinking about this feeling of stuff that goes through you, where you're defenseless, like that hurt you, not the feeling of that you can let things pass through you and it feels fine, like where you kind of feel overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be sounds or whatever, or you try push a kid on a stroller in Manhattan in the winter and the cars, they're on the car level, and just like the honking, the anger and the anxiety that comes at you, and like just this kind of feeling of overwhelmment and how everything passes through you, you know, like you are the sum of all this. You're only part you, and you're a lot of other parts. So I wanted to make a sculpture that embodies this as a thing. So I had the first idea was I have a horse with a carriage as something that I need a protagonist, and it's a bit technical. I wanted a protagonist that implies movement and not object. So it's a horse. And I like the horse and the carriage because it was very light. It's not like a heavy object that sits on the ground, because it's lifted up into the air. The horse and the carriage would have been pierced by about 30 things. And some of these 30 things, the biggest one was a hospital bed. And that came from, because I spent next to somebody that was laying in a hospital bed. So like 10 days, not really sleeping, just making sure they're okay. And you look at this kind of weird thing that a lot of people come in and out of the world on this kind of strange machine that massages and weighs and folds. And I don't know what it does. But so I thought that's definitely needs to be part of it. Then I wanted to make the things. We scanned all these objects, carriages, and it became just too big and too expensive to do. And then I just took the horse and the hospital bed and I combined them. And they looked like they want to belong together. And it's all one body. You see, it's like made out of, it's multiple parts. It's all milled aluminum. So it's a carving.
Yeah.
So they become one.
How do you make something like this?
You scan everything and then you have to texture it. And then
when you're scanning it, are you scanning it from images or from, what do you
three-dimensional things? So I bought a bed like this.
Yes.
We take it apart, we scan, laser scan.
You scan the physical object.
Yeah.
And then you put it together digitally.
And then you
reproduce it.
And then you reproduce it. We need an engineer for all the leverage and weight. And this is milled out of an aluminum that doesn't oxidize. So that's like a special type of alloy. And then I didn't want any seams. So they're just little hairlines, and some parts are pretty insane. So it's not and then it bugged me that I didn't make that carriage thing, but I didn't want to use the horse. And then I made a version where it's not one thing. Just back to what you asked earlier, if you come back to an idea where you have multiple objects, so where you have more that whole experience of all these things that they fly, like nothing touches the ground, but it's a trick with the gravity, but it stands on the rhino's feet.
It's almost like a series of arrows sticking out of an animal,
but
like each of the arrows are, one's a laptop and one's a chair, one
on
of
a
the
big printer.
yeah,
It's just like a selection of random
yeah,
shit,
yeah,
basically.
yeah. When you're digitally composing it, do you move the objects around?
Yeah. So a little here, a little there, till I think it looks good. You know?
You can move around it when you're building it.
Oh, yeah.
3D rendering.
Yeah.
So it seems like technically you get to learn about a lot of materials and how to make stuff. There's a lot that goes into this beyond this is a cool looking object now.
It's pretty intense technically, yeah. And there is even a level where I don't understand much about with engineers of how you crane that up and how you interlock all that stuff. And
does the fact that it's difficult to build, is that ever daunting, or does it ever get in the way of execution?
It does, but it also gets in the way of being economical about it all.
Yeah.
Because I have a hard time.
If it costs too much, you can't even.
I try to do it.
Yeah.
Instead.
You find a way.
I find a way, and usually it works out. But it's like it's not an economical way of going about anything. It's really kind of somewhat a bit extremist,
Yeah.
or obsessive or whatever.
Do you think that the place impacts your work? Either the place you live or the place you are when you're making something?
Guaranteed. I wouldn't know how.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it you know how, and some of it you don't. I couldn't totally understand how. No, place matters so much, no? And also who you work with. And one place I think that matters almost most is what kind of feedback you get on what you do. And that can be a dialogue with a friend. That can be a bit more, a bigger excitement. Like you feel people are excited by something that don't even, like my dream is always to make things where you don't have to know the artist. It's just people encounter something weird or something that stimulates in whatever form, and the work does the job.
Yeah.
That can feel good when you have a moment like that. Just working in a vacuum and not knowing where things go is something I cannot do. I always work for a show, a purpose, a place. Otherwise, I don't see the reason to make a thing.
Yeah. So the things right now, what are you working on right now?
Furniture.
And what's the purpose of it specifically?
What is the purpose of anything? I don't know. The purpose is, I was asked if I want to make a furniture show, and I love furniture.
And will it be used as furniture?
Yeah, totally. And just like it's an interesting endeavor, because when you're not from a place, like let's say, I think if I understand it right, in architecture, design, they have so much history and how it's made and this and that. And then, so they think this way, if you just do something, you're kind of pretty free.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to make sense. It needs to, it comes more from the fact that the physical object, there is only one place on earth, like the pen you have in your hand, there is only one, this space that's occupied by that pen is occupied by that pen. Or whatever, that tree. And if you think of sculptures, they kind of clutter places in some way, which is some part I really don't like about the field of work. I mean, that we use up a lot of space.
Yeah, it takes up space.
Yeah, instead of an idea or an image or a song, there is no space to it, and which is beautiful, So in that, I just thought, like, let's say I have a whole bunch of sculptures. They're all in storage, not my own work, other people's, mostly in storage, because my house is kind of small, and I don't want to expand it, and I don't see no purpose having it in the house. But I do love furniture, and if it's comfortable, and if it's fun.
Yeah, it's functional, it'll work in your life, and you get to be around it.
Yeah, and it looks cool.
Yeah.
Like some of it looks cool. For example, one is this human figure. It was more androgynous. Now it became a more female figure. So this thing, just a little context, that's about 80 something inches. That's a little taller than a human. And it's all out of foam. And this will be covered. But this is the foam. So you can actually sit on the arm. And
I see.
you can sit on the figure. You can sit on all parts.
So it's a sculpture that works as a piece of furniture.
Yeah, this one. Then other ones are sometimes more conservative.
That's really cool. How was your work first noticed?
I studied some photography stuff, like more in an arts and crafts type school, And I always got really into the projects, and then we had some people teaching there, or somehow that gave me some feedback. You see the people react or whatever, and then usually with, let's say I went to the school in Amsterdam and there is other artists there, and you do something and they look for dialogue, and you see you get some feedback. It's a very small notice, but it gives you something, and it usually all came through other artists primarily in the beginning.
Was there a breakthrough moment? Was there a time where it's like, now it's different than it was before?
Yeah, there was one moment. I was maybe 21 or something. I did my first show in a gallery.
This in Amsterdam?
No, that was in Zurich. The show was in Zurich. And after I had that show, I was not the same as the other kids I hung out with, because you're the one that has a little success. So that's the biggest thing. The biggest change I noticed ever was you're kind of now one of those.
Was it how they looked at you or how you looked at yourself that changed?
How I felt being looked at. I mean, what do I know? It's assumptions of who they are, but how I felt I'm looked at or seen. You stop being a little bit you, and you're perceived a little bit as the somebody who makes something.
Would you say it gave you more confidence or not necessarily?
No, it made me insecure for a while. All right, I really didn't know how to. It felt alienating. You know? I mean, you also kind of, sometimes you are just you, and in some context you are you as the person who makes XYZ. I'm a total peace with both of that by now. Yeah, it's not conflicting.
Yeah. When does a piece of work go from an experiment to a finished piece? At what point in the process?
On a good day, on a good day, it's when you don't know what to add anymore.
Yeah.
And on a bad day, it's just
give up.
You kind of give up a bit on it. Just like, I'm sorry, kind of. That's as good as you get,
Yeah.
I don't have it in me today, and I don't want to continue tomorrow.
Tell me how the art business works.
I mean, I have a lot of experiences. I'm not capable of tell you how it works, but one thing is, why does one need to own something? Why do you want to own this or that? And there are people that I met, few, where I really understood what collecting means. And that's not buying stuff to put in your house. Like, some people can be very obsessive. They have thousands of things, and they know everything about each piece and each context, and they're like so knowledgeable, and they basically tell the story.
That's really the audience, essentially.
No, that's not the audience. That's just part of I think what created this art market.
I see.
Is these people, like, they tell a story. I don't know, for example, there's different people, but like somebody like Bruno Bischofberger, who was the guy that was always on the cover or back cover of the Art Forum, or, like a person that's been around from the 60s to now, and I was an old man, but they collected so many things, 10,000s of things. And every conversation I have with him, he just tells me all these stories about whatever, like from some folk art in some 17th century to whatever, and he knows everything, encyclopedic, and he puts it together, and he started with a lot of things that then later became very desirable or collected. He started so many things early, and I mean, the whole conversation is just this thing, this, and then he did only this, and then that artist, and it's like, it's a bizarre amount of information and knowledge, and I sometimes help hanging shows. And there was one collector, he collects only things that happen in New York, and he does that since the mid-60s. So basically, he is like I always think of him as a fisherman that goes to the shore, and you just see a little ripple, and you think, okay, I go there. And some other things can be very loud, so that's just noise, because he has so much discipline and experience and a real passion. So you hang works, up and say, okay, I put one work here and one work there. It says, well, in 1987, this work was hanging next to that thing, and that's how it was first shown by the art, like a really in-depth knowledge. So how that matters with the art market, I think there were always people that had a kind of a knowledge and a connoisseurship. And the way I imagine it, you see these things in somebody's house, and it's kind of awesome. I say, I want that too, and the prices of some of these things is absurd. It makes no sense, because you don't actually get a physical value for any, it's like, what is it? Van Gogh painting worth? You get like a little bit of wood, some really old canvas, and like you get nothing. So it is just what somebody is willing to pay for it, basically.
And the fact that there's a market around it.
And there's a market around it, and in a way that these figures in this market or whatever, like something like back to Van Gogh, everybody knows what that is. So you put it in your house, it's also, you have a Van Gogh in your house. And historically, you did well with these kind of, if you bought one 40 years ago, you did a good deal. So you don't lose anything, you have something to look at.
Yeah.
Then
so it's an investment that holds its value, and
potentially.
Yeah.
How these prices came in the last 20 years or 30 years, or maybe starting in the 80s or something. I'm not totally knowledgeable in that. It is not old stuff. It's new stuff that is made to say, this is going to be a potential future artifact of value. It's a bet.
Yeah.
But then I had a phase where I collected. So I was hooked.
Tell me about that. How did it start? What was the first piece you bought?
Well, first I traded with friends of mine always, and then you hang it in your house. And then I started buying the galleries that I worked with, and you go in some office and see this thing and that thing, and you have one, and then you want more of that same artist, and then you want the ones you got, and then you realize the other ones will be better, so you think you need to have those too, and from there on it goes. And then you have hundreds of things, and you're like, I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
One way, what I felt at that time was I'm a high-end hoarder.
Yeah.
You're a hoarder of interesting, valuable things, but nonetheless, you're a hoarder.
I read that you once had a gallery lower the ceiling for your show.
Sounds like it would be possible. I don't remember. I got kind of out of that vibe.
But what would be the reason for it? Tell me the thinking. Whether you would do it or not now is less the point.
It's all about making the work look good, and that's always in context. I mean, if you put a thing in the right context, it can actually unfold and be itself. It can become something. And like, let's say a wall is very tall and you have a smaller thing
in front of it,
hanging on it.
I see.
It will just fly, like it will feel lost.
The work will be dwarfed by the height of the wall.
Yeah. That's another thing. Like, it's totally bizarre. Like, okay, in my field of work, the galleries are ginormous.
Yeah. But people's homes are not as big as the galleries.
No, and people start, some of artist studios are ginormous, and then they make, like me included, ginormous things. But what's the freaking point here, you know? It's just the context. I mean, because if you make a show somewhere here, this is the way it looks right or feels right, but then what do you do with it after? You know, it's like, I don't totally clock the whole thing.
Tell me the feeling, though, when you've worked on something in a rendering, and let's say the final version is going to be 40 feet tall.
Yeah.
What's it like the first time you see the 40-foot version?
I only see mistakes in the...
Yeah, you only see what's wrong.
Yeah.
Your breath is never taken away with the, wow, look at that.
It happened a few times, but on average, it's...
what's wrong?
My God.
Yeah. And the things that you're seeing and saying, my God, about that are wrong, probably no one else would notice.
No. Oh, I would notice even on somebody else's.
Yes, exactly.
But I always think, like, if something is unfinished or there is a mistake, if somebody really wants to find a mistake, let them have one.
Yes.
It's kind of, we got to reward the people that need to find the mistake.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I trick myself into getting over it.
Yeah, who's to say what's a mistake, you know?
You can tell an insecurity in something.
Yeah.
I mean, is it a mistake? No, but what one would call a mistake, it's just, you know, there's sometimes this was a shortcut or like didn't go all the way.
Are you always working?
Yes. But to me, it makes no difference. I can bake a cake or I just always need to
making
do
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you done any multimedia work?
Very little.
Ever film?
I made a film when I was like 20, 21, something.
Was that a good experience?
I liked it. Yeah, I was just broke after because I financed it myself. I was broke for like half a year after that. And then I had that film and I didn't know what to do with it. And
yeah.
That was interesting, like, you know, the whole process. But I'm not a moving image person, I believe. I think moving images is one thing. I could do that. I don't like narratives. I mean, I like them okay.
Yeah. It's not your thing.
Yeah, no. I mean, even to watch, I have the longer, the more a harder time watching TV or movies or something. You know?
But what are the things that you find comfort in watching?
Really mindless can be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's almost a form of meditation to me. Like, you know, you empty your brain. It's not you sit there depressed. Like, it's just really like just nothing here. I watched recently something, I thought, what was it called? Adolescence or something. It was a short, it's like a miniseries, 5 episodes on Netflix, written by one of the main actors. And it's not fun to watch, but each episode is filmed. So you have a story of this one act by one son in a family, adolescent, and how it affects the family. And it's like, first you're like one day after or a few hours after that thing. And it's always real time. So the whole episode is filmed in one shot. So it's like a play, and you go in a car and you go there. So they rehearsed, and then the emotions go up and down. You go in it. And so then you're 3 days after, then you are like 3 months after, then you are whatever, a year after and a year and a half after. So that was really smart. Like, you watch it and you're like, I didn't read what it is.
Yeah.
And then you realize this shot never ends. That's a more technical thing, but just the emotions, the range, and it was really felt like substantial, like a experience. And that somebody can put that as an entertainment, like this kind of thing, a lot of respect for that.
What's the most beautiful place you've ever been?
It's by or at the sea or ocean, that I know. But then I have a lot of...
Many choices.
Yeah.
Name a couple that you like.
I had really beautiful times in Greece, the water or the sun setting by the water, or like this kind of colors are very different and smells are different. And you have here, there's sometimes in the Caribbean, there is a kind of one place I've been, this smoothness to the water and the wind and also the light, the temperature kind of not fluctuating much. And I mean, that works for me,
Yeah.
And some islands where the anxiety is far away.
Yeah. And tell me something that you believe now that you didn't believe when you were young.
That life is way crazier than anything somebody can imagine. Like in where everything goes since I'm a kid, And the other thing, peace, that you can find some form of peace within yourself or love, like how that feels.
Was there a time when you were young where you doubted you would ever feel those?
See, I grew up with a lot of anxiety, not only my own, but like everybody around me. Or in my case, I definitely mistook anxiety for love, because that's kind of what you grow up with. And it's not that you can have both for somebody, but it's like when it comes in a fused package, it kind of
confusing.
It's confusing to extract the anxiety and then just have the love and to kind of let that be.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. What are your parents like?
They're very nice people, I don't think they were good parents, but they're very nice people.
Yeah.
And they're still around. I mean, my dad is now Alzheimer's and it's going, like that kind of stuff. But two people that didn't have easy lives, a lot of family dramas and stuff, hard times. They kind of carried all that with them into their young relationship, and they stayed together all their life. They're still together, 50 whatever years, 80 years, something like that.
When's the last time you were in Zurich?
About a month and a half ago to visit them, yeah.
Has it changed a lot since you were growing up?
Yeah.
In what ways?
Like most cities, it just cleans up somehow, and a lot of the kind of funky, interesting stuff fades away or gets replaced, or everything needs to make enough money. Well, there's no crappy old cafes anymore. They're all kind of new and look the same than any other. Like that kind of part I miss. I miss old rotten facades and buildings and, like a little...
You would have loved New York in the 70s.
Yeah.
It's not like that anymore.
No, it's crazy. I mean, that place really changed so much. Unbelievable, no?
Tetragrammaton is a podcast. Tetragrammaton is a website. Tetragrammaton is a whole world of knowledge.
What may fall within the sphere of Tetragrammaton? Counterculture? Tetragrammaton. Sacred geometry? Tetragrammaton. The avant-garde? Tetragrammaton. Generative art? Tetragrammaton. The tarot? Tetragrammaton. Out-of-print music? Tetragrammaton. Biodynamics? Tetragrammaton. Graphic design? Tetragrammaton. Mythology and magic? Tetragrammaton. Obscure film? Tetragrammaton. Beach culture? Tetragrammaton. Esoteric lectures? Tetragrammaton. Off-the-grid living? Tetragrammaton. Alt spirituality? Tetragrammaton. The canon of fine objects? Tetragrammaton. Muscle cars? Tetragrammaton. Ancient wisdom for a new age. Upon entering, experience the artwork of the day. Take a breath and see where you are drawn.